So we didn't do all that many. I did 12 under him. That's not a lot. For the tri-state area, they say on average is about 10 a year. But no one Rav gets all 10. And he did on average about one a year. You know, the circumstance leading up to Chalitza are always unfortunate. It means that somebody was married and he died without children, and that's always an unfortunate thing. So you never come to Chalitza and it's a happy occasion. It's a mitzvah, and it's an exciting mitzvah, and it's an unusual mitzvah, and everybody wants to be part of it, everyone wants to see it, but it's always with a little bit of heartache. There's always a little bit of a tinge of sadness in every Chalitza. People come into this world and they want to accomplish something. They want to do something. They want to leave over something. They want to leave something over. And unfortunately, sometimes a person doesn't have children and he has nothing to leave over. He has nothing to give to continue. People who don't have children, they work very hard. They do all kinds of things in order to be able to have children. It's a thing that people want to have. They want to leave over children in this world. And a person doesn't have children, so the Torah gave a mitzvah of Yibum. If you learn Daf Yomi, right? So you had the whole year of that, a mitzvah of Yibum, where the mitzvah is that the two closest relatives, the two people that are possible to do something to save this guy's ambitions and his agenda, his brother and his wife, could join together and to continue to do something to build his legacy. And that would be the mitzvah of Yibum. That's how the Shem explains it. The Ben Chaya, the Ramban, the Sefer Chinuch, that's how they explain the idea of Yibum. Sometimes that's not the right way to go. Not all that glitters is gold. So that's not the way to go. So the Torah gave a mitzvah of Chalitza. Now the Medrash says that Avrohom Avinu was zoich the mitzvah of Chalitza. Why? Because he told the Melech Sodom that I won't touch anything you gave us, anything that I captured from Sodom, mechut v'atzreich Hana'al. So he mentioned tzreich Hana'al, the string that you used for a shoe, so that gave him kind of mitzvah Chalitza. What was the Avrohom Avinu saying to Melech Sodom? Now Avrohom Avinu was promised by the Eibishter great wealth. Right? You're going to get great wealth. And he got great wealth in a lot of funny ways. He had to deal with Paroi, he had to deal with Avimelech, and he took their money. When it came to the Melech Sodom, he didn't take his money. The difference between Paroi and Avimelech was Paroi gave Avrohom Avinu his own money. And Avimelech gave Avrohom Avinu his own money. He was paying Avrohom Avinu. The Melech Sodom was bragging about something he didn't own. There was a war, and Sodom lost. And the four kings had captured everything. Nothing belonged to the Melech Sodom. He lost everything. Avrohom Avinu went, he fought a war against the four kings, he beat the four kings, now everything was his. The Melech Sodom didn't come into the picture. How did he get into this picture? What was Avrohom Avinu worried that he's going to say, I made Avrohom wealthy. Melech Sodom can't say anything. But that's what Melech Sodom was. He was that type of guy. The truth and the facts were irrelevant. But if he could say something that would undermine the Eibishter, that say the Eibishter's plan to make Avrohom Avinu wealthy, even if I have to make him wealthy in odd ways, but that's the Eibishter's plan to make Avrohom Avinu wealthy. If a Melech Sodom is going to say, it wasn't the Eibishter, it was me. It's my money. It's a baloney. But it's my money. That's what he's saying. It's my money. So not all that glitters is gold. Now Avrohom Avinu didn't want to touch such kind of money. So the Eibishter gave him a mitzvah that's very similar. That would be a great idea if the brother and the wife could marry, but not every time is that appropriate. And therefore, the Eibishter gave a mitzvah that you can do something to sever that marriage in a way that will be b'kavadik for everybody. So what happens at a Chalitza? So the average Chalitza takes about 45 minutes. So what takes 45 minutes, right? She has to pull off a shoe and she got to spit. What takes 45 minutes? The answer is that the majority of the time at a Chalitza is spent addressing legal issues. There's a lot of legal stuff that you got to get through at a Chalitza. A lot of legal stuff. And there's a whole booklet. It's printed in the back of the standard Shulchan Aruch. It's called Seder Chalitza. Seder Chalitza, the Meram Joseph. That was his name. He was a dayan in Krakow in the time of Tach V'Tat. He lived through Tach V'Tat. He was the dayan of Krakow during those years, and he wrote what's called the Seder Chalitza. He wasn't the first person to write a Seder Chalitza. He wasn't the last person to write the Seder Chalitza, but he wrote the most popular one. And he wrote the Seder Chalitza. And then they come to the Seder Chalitza, they come to the Chalitza, even the biggest Rabbanim and the biggest experts, they come with the book. Because it's a very unusual mitzvah, and you got to get it right. There's no time to fix it. You got to get it right the first time. Because if you learn Chalitza right, sometimes if you do Chalitza wrong, what happens? You learn Yivamis? Right? Yivamis, you do Chalitza wrong? Not always, but sometimes it's Chazer Sakol Achen. They got to do it not just again over here, but you got to do it with all the brothers. There can be 6 brothers. They can be all over the world. It's a problem. You don't want to send her, and you don't want to send her through this twice. It's hard enough that she has to do it once. So make sure you get it right the first time. So they come with the Seder Chalitza and they read through the Seder Chalitza. And what kind of legal stuff are they interested in? Well, step number 1, you have to know that Mrs. whatever she is, Mrs. Almana, was once upon a time married to Mr. Dead. How do you know they were ever married? So she says she was married. So you have to prove that they were once married. How do you prove that? Okay, so she'll produce a ksuba. How do you know that she is who she said she is? You know, it's happened in the world in general, not in my personal experience, but there are stories that go around where people came to a get, and the lady was in a bad marriage, she wanted to get out of it, so she hired somebody off the street to come with her to the get, and write the get, and now she can go present that she has a get, right? These stories have happened. You know, Baruch Hashem, they were caught. But these things have happened. So how do you know that this man and this woman were ever married? Okay, how do you know they are who they claim to be? How do you know that this brother is who he's claimed to be? Most of the time you come to a Chalitza, the people are all unknown. It's very rare that the person happens to be that he davens in that shul, and it happens to be that the Rav knows them, and that's a rare, can't say it never happened, but that'd be a very rare occurrence. Most of the time, when Chalitza happens, it's total strangers. They happen, somebody died in Long Island, and this guy lived in Chicago, and they come together to Beis Din in New York, and nobody knows anything. So they spend a lot of time going through the legal stuff, identifying everybody who they say that they're going to be. You got to bring your picture IDs. I'm serious. You got to bring your picture IDs. And they did hundreds of years ago. They used Eidim. Nowadays, at the Chalitza itself, we use Eidim. But before the Chalitza, just to find out, in the days before the Chalitza, when we're planning it, we find out who these people are. So we want to see their picture ID. You want to see the ksuba. You want to see the marriage license. You want to see the death certificate. You want to have all this information clear. Now, once you have all this information, so by Chalitza, the Eid Echad works, right? You learned the Chalitza. Doesn't he learn Daf Yomi already? Am I talking to just people that are just here for interest? So I want to assume knowledge then. But there's a Gemara in Chalutz that says Eid Echad works for Chalitza, Eid and P. works. It's the Medina that we know this information. We were told this information. We're making it known. So it means that Ruvain says that this is the fact. Shimon is allowed to repeat it. So for Chalitza, all this works. That's a Gemara in Chalutz. For the Chalitza, all this works. So when it comes to the Chalitza, so the day before the Rav can verify everything, or the Shamus, or whoever is involved with the procedures, whoever is doing the intake, can verify everything. When it comes to actual Chalitza, we do use Eidim. But those Eidim are usually Eid P. Eid, which means is that the Rav or the Shamus tells the guys in the morning, please meet the brother, and he is the brother of Mr. Deceased, and he is the brother-in-law of Mrs. whatever it is, and the Rav identifies everybody, and they can now say Eid P. Eid, B'Shas Chalitza, they can say their Eidus, and that's generally how it works. So the first step of a Chalitza is just identifying all the people that you need to identify. The next step is making sure that the people that we know that there are people that are really eligible for Chalitza. You have to know that it's 92 days from the time of death, meaning the day of death. You need 90 days, but the day of death and the day of the Chalitza don't count. So you need to have 90 days, so 92 days from death to the Chalitza. You have to have 92 days. How often does it happen? Usually Chalitzas happen very late, very much later, but sometimes they can happen. There are people that are rushing to go. It happened to it not so long ago. There was a story, this happened not so long ago. Bluth already was nifta 3 years ago, but Rabbi Bluth, that there was the Chalutz lived in Eretz Yisrael. He came in for the Levaya, came in for the Shiva. He wanted to be part with it right away. He came in for the Levaya, came for the Shiva, and now he wanted to go back to Eretz Yisrael. Let's get it over with. And no, you gotta wait. No, please. The guy says, please call Reb David. It's total Reb Bluth. I mean, it's a mechaber. There's nothing to talk about. There's no wiggle room on this one. It's a Gemara. Please call Reb David. He asked him, you'll save me so much trouble. I shouldn't have to come back. Now, really, he doesn't have to come back. He didn't know that. The rule is that the Chalutza has to travel to him. But whatever. That was the story. Okay, so you have to identify that they know that they're eligible. It's possible, for whatever reason, sometimes they were in a fight, whatever reasons, that he won't want to do Chalitza. He's being forced into the Chalitza. We had a Chalitza in Long Island, in Hapog, Long Island. Don't ask me how to spell that. In Hapog, Long Island. Well, Connecticut also has a lot of funny names. And Naugatuck. Anyway, that at least I know how to spell. In Hapog, the guy was so antagonistic. The brother became Baal Tshuva. I don't know, but I didn't know him, but they told me he was always around. He was the friendliest, sweetest man. The brother was so antagonistic. He opened the door to the front of his house. He let us in. There's like a square. The front door opens like 6 by 6 feet. 6 square feet. That's we had to do. That's as much as we can get into his house. He was so antagonistic. So sometimes you get that. So he says, I'm being forced into the Chalitza. I don't want to do it. I made a neder not to do it. I made a Mesiras Medah that I'm not going to do it. And I said before, and I took Eidim, and I said I'm not going to do the Chalitza. So these things could impact the Chalitza in a negative way. So even though there's a machlokes nemar about Chalitza Meusa, if you force the Chalitza, you get it done again, contrary to his will, whether it's kosher or not. And even if we paskin that it's kosher, but it's certainly b'di'evet. So you got to make sure that they do everything chalchila. So you have to mat the neder for the person. You have to be mevatel medois. It's a lot. All these things take a very long time. Then you finally get up to the chalitza. Right? Then we finally get to the chalitza. Okay, and let's backtrack now. Let's go through the steps of the chalitza. Before you do a chalitza, so we have to be kvei makam. What's kvei makam? That the day before, the chatchila between mincha and ma'ariv, but the main thing is when the main thing is when the most people would be available. So what he writes, the Dayan of Krakow, is that they wouldn't unlock the doors of the Bishmedish, the main shul in Krakow, until everybody came, and then they'd be kvei makam, and then they'd go in for mincha. That's how they did it. Because the main thing is to be mefarisim. So whether it's before mincha or after mincha, between mincha and ma'ariv, whatever you get the biggest crowd, that's what you want to do. There's an Indian that based on the pasuk that also that she has to be in the sha'ar. The sha'ar is the main place of the city, right? The main center of the city. It's called the sha'ar here. Why is that called sha'ar here? It's a good question. But when it says all over the Chumash, when it says sha'ar here, when it says by Rus is busy with Chalitza also, Yibum really. It says that she went to the Shar, right? It's always the Shar. The Shar really is not really the gate of the city. It's where the 4 gates meet. Right? What? Town square. That's why it's a square, because the 4 gates meet over there. What's the 4 gates? Ancient cities, if you look carefully in Tanakh, Derech HaMelech Nelech, by Parshas Chukas, by the Tel Edom, Derech HaMelech Nelech. What's the Derech HaMelech? Derech is Peretz Ged, and he makes his derech. Right? What's the word? The word was all ancient societies. In all ancient societies, the royal or national roads were perfectly straight lines. You can stand on one end of a road, and you can shoot a straight arrow 30, 50, 100 miles down, and be perfectly straight. Melech Noikiv Harim, Tomorrow Babasa, Melech Noikiv Harim, the king wants to build a road, he's borrows through a mountain. They take away a mountain, they remove a mountain to make the road straight. Adiyam Izeh, if archaeologists in any place in Europe, any place where the Romans made it, if they find a little bit of a road in any place, they figure out this, they know that that to go in a straight line, they can find 10, 30, 50 miles, they're going to find the next hemshech of that road. And there are places like that in Eretz Yisrael. They take you to, if you go to the old city, the Cordo, the Cardo, I'm sorry, it's pronounced Cardo, right? The Cardo has it there, the Cardo, you go through the old city, is the Cardo is one such road. And it meets in the Arab Quarter, it meets with another road, Derech Chevron, that's a perfectly straight road that goes to Chevron. And they pick it up along the way, from Yerushalayim to Chevron, you can pick it up the road, it's a perfectly straight line. All ancient roads. Achashverosh got a message across 127 Medinas in how many days? How many days? Chav Gimel Sivan, right? Mordechai's letters went out Chav Gimel Sivan, and that was the same, he waited for the same couriers. So he sent them out from Rosh Chodesh Adar, sorry, not Rosh Chodesh Adar, from Nisan, when he made the thing, Yud Gimel Nisan, till Chav Gimel Sivan. How many days is that? Who's good at math? Right? From Yud Gimel Nisan, when Haman wrote his letters, right, that says in the Megillah, and Mordechai wrote his letters, Chav Gimel Sivan, that means the same couriers went out and came back. And how many days? They got to 127 Medinas. They had a very good road system. What happened later? The barbarians, the way we blame everything on the barbarians, but it really was the barbarians. They destroyed everything. Byzantines, the barbarians, they destroyed everything. They put the world back, the Dark Ages, they put the world back, set the world back 500 years. We just lived in the darkness. The Sha'ar just this is off the topic. I like to go off the topic. The Sha'ar is the center of the city where all four roads converge. That's the Sha'ar. And all over Chumash, when it says Sha'ar, that means the spot where the four gates, the four parts of the city. It's negated a lot of halachas. Eruvin, different places, just a rabbim. This information is very negated. Okay, let's go back onto our topic. So we kaveh makam. So you have to be kaveh makam. Kaveh makam is that you gather the bezdin. Who's the bezdin? The Av Bezdin, usually the rabbi who presides over the Chalitza is the Av Bezdin. He's the main person that is involved. Okay, and then there's two Dayanim. Those are the two main guys. Those are two guys. And the Av Bezdin does most of the work. The two Dayanim chime in a little bit, not so much. They chime in a little bit. There's the Av Bezdin, the two Dayanim. And who are those people? So if it's an official bezdin, the members of the official bezdin. But most of the time, it's the Rav who's in charge of the Chalitza was a Talmud Chacham, a Paisik, a very important person in the halachic world, and he brings along with him his Talmidim. Usually, those are the rest of the people officiating at the Chalitza. These are his Talmidim or other Rabbanim that the local rabbi of the shul or whatever it is. So it's the bezdin, two Dayanim, and they need two Nosafim. Two Nesafim are two other people. They come along, they're quasi dayanim. They don't sit on the row of the three. They sit off to the side. On the side, there's a separate row. This way, for the dayanim sitting here, these guys sit here, and they're perfectly silent the entire chalitza. They don't do anything. They're just there to be extras and make sure that there's a minyan at the chalitza. They should be pirsum. That's really the only role, that they should be pirsum. Besides that, you need the chalutza, and technically you need a shamus. How many people do you have so far? 8, good. And you need 2 Eidim. So altogether, you have a minimum of 10 people at a chalitza, counting the woman. But it says in the Pasuk in Shulchan Aruch you have to have 10 people at a chalitza, so that gives us 10 of the basics. Chatchila to have a 10th man, so Chatchila 10th man. Chatchila to have it in a place of pirsum, so Chatchila do it in a place of pirsum, you can have 50 or 100 people at a chalitza. But you had to have at least 10. Those 10 are built into the system. You're always going to have 10. Okay, so all 10, not necessarily all 10, but the 3 Dayanim and the 2 Nesafim, they gather at the time of Kaveh Makam, and there's a special nusach to read. They say they're going to be Kaveh Makam. They say the names of the people that have been of the Chalitza, and they go from wherever their starting point is, usually the Rav seat in Shul, until the place they're going to do the Chalitza. Api Kabbalah, once they Kaveh Makam, nobody's allowed to walk in that spot afterwards, so they cordon it off, lock the doors, put tape, whatever it is, put signs of invitation. You should come in, so maybe not signs. But Api Kabbalah, nobody's supposed to go in that area from the time they Kaveh Makam until the actual Chalitza. I mean, sometimes it's a problem. They make it as nashim or something. Whatever, you have to work it out. You have to have a little bit of teichel on how to make these things happen. Okay, so Kvei Malkum. After Kvei Malkum, everybody goes home. The next morning they come back. What time of the day do you make chalitzas? So chalitzas are traditionally made first thing in the morning. Why? Because the chalutz is not allowed to eat before a chalitza. And number one, you want to guarantee that she's not going to eat. And if you make it at 11 o'clock in the morning, you don't know that she didn't have a coffee. And number two is it's unfair. Why should you make her fast? For what reason? For what purpose? So usually chalitza is done first thing in the morning. You have to do it by day. So you do it in the morning, but the first thing in the morning. Okay, so you do chalitza first thing in the morning. I've been at times, usually we did it in the shul, we did it, davening was 8 o'clock, and then we did it afterwards. When we did it other places, we davened sometimes vasikin, and did it right after Shachris. Depending on what the situation was, where we had to be, what else was going on. So you create makom. The next morning you go back. You don't do the kviyas makom again, but you say this a very similar nusach. Let's go to the place where we kviyas makom yesterday, and they come into the kviyas makom. They come into the spot and they set themselves up. And the oilam comes in, the chalitza comes in, the chalutza comes in, and now they start the procedures. They go through all the stuff that they verified yesterday, that the people are old enough, that the chalutza and the chalutza are of age, that there was one to marriage, that he's a brother-in-law. All the stuff that I spoke about a few minutes ago, they review all of that stuff, but now they do it official. They're doing it with the Seder Chalitza, and they have Edom verifying. Yesterday, the Edom may not have even known these people before, and we had to show them the marriage certificate or the driver's license to verify these are the people that they claim to be. Today, we do it officially. The Edom are saying, because Edom P8 works for Chalitza, so they're saying that yes, we know these guys are the people that claim to be, and then you do the Hataras Hadarim, and then we do the Bittul Meidais, all this stuff, and all this stuff, even if you're working fast, takes a long time. I'll just tell you a word about Rabbi Luth. Rabbi Luth was the coolest person, the most chilled person I ever met. Nothing could faze him, nothing could rattle him, nothing. He took pride in his entire career. He never scrammed at anybody. He never said a nasty word to anybody in his entire biblical career, like 50 years, except for one time where he had to go to a prison to get a get from somebody who left his first wife, married a second woman, killed the second woman, and now has had life in prison someplace upstate New York, and he had to get a get for the first wife. And getting permission from the warden, getting together the team, the Aiden, the Sefer, is a whole ASIC. And he finally got to the prison. The guy said, I'm not interested in giving a get. Not interested. And he let the guy have it. And the guy wrote the get. There was no second chance, so he let the guy have it. In his 50 years of a rabbinical thing, when he came to Chalitzas and Mechiras Chametz, you can see him sweating, and you can see him like he was nervous and tense and shaking. He took it very, very ernst. Mechiras Chametz, it happened every year by Mechiras Chametz, and every time there's a Chalitza, he was very, 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 not agitated, that's the wrong word, it's the opposite of what I'm trying to say. He was very concerned and maybe anxious. He took it very, very serious. So we finally got all the stuff out of the way, and now we're ready for the Chalitza. So what happens at a Chalitza? So now we know everybody's eligible, and we're ready to do it. So you got to get the shoe. So Chalitza shoes are not something you can buy in Walmart. Chalitza shoes, in fact, are not something you can buy any place in the world. When I first wanted my Chalitza shoe, my first Chalitza shoe, I'd never seen one, not a real one. And I mean, I actually had, because I'd done already a few chalitzas at Rebbe Luth by the time we made a shoe. But I wanted to borrow a chalitza shoe, and I wanted to use it to write my book about chalitza. I wanted to take pictures, and I wanted to have it in front of me, and nobody's willing to part with their chalitza shoe. Whoever had them, they treated them like their most prized possession. Finally, I found the Rav in Muncie was something okay for $500. If you leave me $500 mashkin, I'll lend you my shoe. It didn't sound like it was the way to go. So I was complaining to my brother in Eretz Yisrael. He says, "Oh, I heard there's a shoemaker here in Yerushalayim that makes chalitza shoes." Turned out the V'tak was such a guy, and he claimed to have the template of a Shmuel Salant. Shmuel Salant was the Rav in the turn of the century, the Rav of Yerushalayim, and he claimed to have the template of Shmuel Salant. So it was getting an official shoe. So I had commissioned the shoe, and it was merely $150, a lot less than the mashkin the other guy wanted. And Baruch Hashem, I had a shoe, and I took it and all that. And when it came time for camp, so I had to take it apart to trace it. I needed the template. I had to take it apart, and it was dreadful. I couldn't bring myself to think about taking apart the shoe that was so hard to get a hold of. I should take it apart, and what will I do if I can't put Humpty back together? So it was a big pain. And Baruch Hashem, I took it apart and put it back together. And that shoe, I actually, for a few years, it sat in my drawer, dismantled, and I put it back together last week. But that's not this shoe. This shoe is a shoe that I copied. I traced from that shoe, and that's what I have over here. And what is the shoe? Let's go quickly through the shoe. It's sort of an unusual looking shoe. And if you see it on the person with the straps laced around, it's a little bit more unusual. So what's the shoe all about? So there's a Gemara. If you're doing Daf Yomi, I don't do Daf Yomi, but I think it's today's blot. It should be today's blot. That the Gemara says that the ideal footwear to use for a Chalitza is a sandal. And if you don't have a sandal, you can use a minnow. So the Rishonim tell us that we don't know what a sandal looked like. And there's a few places in Chazal where Chazal talk about a sandal, but you can take guesses what a sandal should be like, but we don't know what it really looked like, and you can't if it doesn't meet the rules, so then it's going to be a problem. That's one thing. Secondly, is that the Chayim point out that there were many sandals. That's like anything else. There were many styles. So even if you get me the one from the museum, how do I know that's the one the Chazal were talking about? So, but the minnow that they had in the time of the Shainim tell us that the minnow they had in the time of the Shainim was the same style that they had in the time of Chazal. So if the minnow of Chazal worked, even at only second rate, but if the minnow of Chazal worked, so then the minnow of the Shainim, which was the same style, could also work. So this shoe, with a few is the minnow of the Shainim, and we have those in the museums. We have Chalitza shoes, preserved Chalitza shoes, not from the Shainim time, but from the Achreinim from a few hundred years that we have, and we have Masorah for hundreds of years of how to have a minnow. Now it's adapted. I mean, it's not the perfect minnow. This has been adapted to put into it the things that we know the sandal had. The minnow of Chazal did not have laces. The laces are an adaptation to this minnow because the sandal had laces. The minnow of Chazal did not have cutouts. But the cutouts are here in order that the laces can go directly onto the leg, like the sandal of Chazal, the laces went directly on the leg, so the cutouts are here in order that the laces can go directly on. Okay, there's another purpose to the laces, that if she had a shoe like this, right, a slip-on shoe. So most I see people I see here are wearing tied shoes, good, because the slip-on shoes, at least my experience with slip-on shoes, are slip-ons or slip-offs. And they go. Eventually, when you first get them, they can't put them on. You can't get them off. But after a few days, you can't get them off. You can't get them on. You can't get them off for a different reason. They just slide right off, right? So if this shoe had nothing to hold it on, it would slide right off. It's not the type to stay on anything. So the laces hold it on. The lashon of the Achreinim, kadesh the heavy Chalitza mal yasa. It should be a real Chalitza. If the shoe was loose like this, and it would just fall down. So having it with the buttons and with the laces makes it that she's really taking off something. It's a shoe and it's on, and now she has to remove it. Okay. Sandals had exposed stitching. Your jacket has the stitching inside the seam. Right? You don't see the stitches. Sometimes you get a shirt that has a white shirt but has a blue, has a blue stripe down the front of the stitching. So that you get that sometimes. It's a sticky thing, but generally stitching is inside. The sandal, we know from Chazal that the stitching was exposed. So the shoe, the Chalitza shoe, the stitching is exposed. The white shoe, this is dafka white, and these are dafka white because that's how it was in the time of Chazal. And there are Achronim who say that now that colors, styles changed, and now that people use black, we should switch it to black. There are Chalitza shoes I've seen with black lacing, but I've never seen black straps. So you go today to Chalitzas, so there are white laces, or Ruth preferred the shoe with the white lace, so that's why I make them white. Black lace is a lot easier to get a hold of, a lot cheaper, and easier to use, but he preferred the white one, so we use the white one. What else do you have to know about the shoe? The angle over here, this part over here, which is, if you speak shoe language, this is called the upper, right? Or the vamp. You speak shoes? Okay, in shoe language, this piece here, this whole piece is called the upper, and this section in particular is called the vamp. Did you know that there's names for every part of the shoe? The shoes, in a real shoe, your regular shoe you're wearing probably has 30 names for each part of it. So this is, the vamp is cut low, and it shouldn't go higher than the ankle. And a good part of the foot should be exposed, because on a sandal, the top of the foot was mostly exposed. The sandal had a toe box, so it has to go over the toes a little bit, because the sandal did have a toe box, and the sandal had an akev. What's an akev? So heel. What's a heel in English? In English, when you say the heel, you mean the piece of plastic that goes underneath your shoe. In Chazal, it could sometimes mean the part over here. But when Chazal use the word akev, they usually mean this part, which in shoe language means it's called the counter. They usually mean this. This is the area of the akev. So a shoe has to have an akev. Okay. And what else do we need to know? And then you have the buttons. These buttons are very cute buttons to make. They're made of leather, and you have to get them in. And it's easy enough for me to put them on, get them in, because I'm using two hands. But the woman who takes them off has to take it off using only her right hand. And only her right hand, but also only standing. And his foot has to be on the ground. Now that's a cool trick. She's standing, his foot is on the ground, and she has to use only one hand to take it off. Right? So try doing that with one hand behind your back. It's a pretty cool trick. Okay? I could do it with one hand because I practiced, and because there's no foot here, and because I did some tricks to my shoe. Because I'm not Houdini, but I can do some tricks. What I do, I double cut the notch. I double cut it, so even if you don't see it so wide, but it's wider, and I also scraped it down a little bit. It shouldn't be rough. Leather sticks to itself, and there's no knots holding this together. Leather sticks to itself, and it's held together by just plain old tension, right? So over here, if you're trying to unbutton it, leather on skin, it's a near impossible trick. But it happens every time they do a chalitza, she gets it off. Okay, so then he puts on the shoe. Now he gets the shoe, he has to check for chalitza, he has to check for chatzitzis. So he has to check the shoe for chatzitzis. You know, it's a rabbinical procedure. We don't really expect chatzitzis because we know who used it last, and we know how it was made, but we check it every time for chatzitzis. And I once discovered, it's not a story for now, but I once discovered a shoe that actually had a lining. And the lining is Mechaikas Rishonim, whether, it's Mechaikas in the Gemara, but it's Mechaikas Rishonim how to paskin, whether if a shoe with a lining is kosher. And even if it's kosher, it's only with the evet. So that was a strike. Alright, so then that's the shoe. The shoe can't have a lining, no chesitzes on the foot, no bandages, no scabs, no chesitzes on the foot. You got to get the foot in here. So how big is the shoe? How big is his foot? So imagining his foot is, how big is the average man's foot? A foot, right? A foot is supposed to be a foot. They're not really. But so you got to make the shoe big enough that he should be able to walk on it. He shouldn't be tripping over himself on it, and he shouldn't be too tight that he can't walk. That it's too much pressure to walk. We make our shoes just in camp. We make them size 11 because that's pretty much a size that works for everybody. You can fit a 12 in there. You can fit a 9 in there. It works. if the guy was really small or really tall, we'd have to make another shoe. But being that we're Yeridea boys, we know how to make Chalitza shoes. We can make it on the fly. So, okay. And what other important features are there of the shoe? So you check the shoe for Chalitzitzis, and you check his foot for Chalitzitzis, and you got to get the shoe on his foot, and you have to know which foot to put it on. Because just because you're right-handed doesn't mean that you are right-footed. Because some people can be right-footed, and some people can be left-footed. And which foot is your right foot, which foot is your left foot? So when you start walking, if you're standing still, and you start walking, so whichever foot you move first is your right, we can call it your main foot.
Dominant.
What?
Dominant.
Dominant, that's a good word. That's your dominant foot. So, and that's the foot you have to put the shoe on. Now what happens if you don't know for sure which guy is? You test him. You ask him to step on the chair. Right? If he knows you're trying to test him, it doesn't always work. So you ask him to step on the chair, you ask him to kick a ball, kick the wall. Yeah, and then sometimes he plays some so he asked him to hop. It's a funny thing, I don't know why, but it says, and I tried it and it seems to work, that people who are right-footed, if you ask them to hop, will hop on the left, will pick up the right foot and hop on the left foot. I don't know why, but that's a pretty good one, and he won't realize that he's trying to trick you. Now you just gave out the secret. But people that are right-footed, if you ask them to hop, will pick up their right foot and hop on the left foot. So, okay, so that's the shoe. And you got the shoe on his foot, and you button it up, and you lace it up. And if my friend over here would have gotten me the screen, I have pictures I show about how you lace it. You have to crisscross it between the buttons, between the cutouts in the back, and you put it on top of the foot, and you wrap it around this foot, and you tie a single knot, tie it tight, that should stay on, because that's the point of the lacing. You tie a second knot, but you tie that loose, because if you tie it tight, she's never going to be able to open it, because leather sticks to leather, and she only has one hand, and she has to be standing. So she would never, if you tie the second knot tight, she would never get it open. But to make it stay, you tie 2 knots and a bow.
Straps of leather also?
The straps are leather. Everything has to be leather. Everything has to be leather. Hana'al tachash. It's a pasuk on the pasuk on Kuf Beis. It's a pasuk in Yecheskel, but the Gemara brings it in Yevamos Kuf Beis. The Hana'al tachash. Hana'al? I think it's Hana'al tachash, and everything has to be made out of leather. The more even as have me maybe make some of the stitching out of pishtan, out of linen, but we pass on that. No, everything has to be made of leather. Okay, so you get it on.
Standing on higher ground.
What?
Could he be standing on higher ground?
So this is a question I never asked. I don't know why not. He can't stand on a chair. He can't stand on a stool. But why didn't they put him on? Could you? A lot of times there's a shul, there's an kodesh, there's a stage or something. There are places where you can put a person. A lot of times there are places where you can put him on a higher ground, and I don't know why. It's be very impractical most of the time because he has to be leaning on the wall. So if you have him on a stage, and the stage, she's standing on the lower ground in front of the stage, and he's leaning this. It's 3 feet between them, 5 feet between them. It's not so practical in our setups. But why, halachically, why not? I never asked that question, so I don't know the answer. But that is a question that at this port, every single person, every single shit I've given the last 2 weeks, they asked me that question, and I don't know the answer. I should spend 5 minutes and look it up. Okay. It has to become a kosher animal, but it doesn't have to be a kosher slaughtered animal. Like I don't know, this is calf leather, but I have no clue if the calf was slaughtered kosher, and most likely it wasn't. Okay. All right. Where are we up to? So she gets the shoe on, and now she has to take it off. So she steps up to take off the shoe. And like I told you, he has to be standing. He's not allowed to help her. She has to do it all by herself. So he has to stand with his feet on the ground. But if he stands the way I'm standing now, with his feet on the ground, she can never get it out of it. She'll never get it off because she takes it off his shoe. She's going to topple him. So Terry says he's going to help her. He's going to pick up his foot. That's not going to work. So what we do is we put a board against the wall, a table, a folding table, whatever works. put something against the wall at a slight angle, and this way he can lean back, and his pressure is off his feet, so his feet are on the ground, firmly on the ground. He's not picking it up, but she can lift up the foot to take it away, and she won't topple him. Okay, so he's standing like that. She pulls off the shoe, and she has to be standing because everything doing bezdin has to be done standing. And she pulls off the shoe, and she takes it and she wraps it up, and I hope you have a catch. And she throws it across the room, like that. And by that guy, that was a punishment. The guy didn't let us into the past his little corner over there. When she threw it, it landed in his fish tank. Okay, and now you have to spit. But take a lady, an alman and achtetzu, in front of a group of rabbanim and a whole room full of men, very often in a shul, and tell her to spit. But that's what the halacha is. Yarkal b'fanav. So, Reb Luz had a story early in his career where a younger, new rabbi, at that time he'd just come to Bezdin of the RCA, called him up and said, I have a case of a Chalitza, and the Chalitz's wife, the brother's wife, won't let him participate. Why not? Because no woman is going to spit at my husband. That's it. He said, spit at the husband. Tell her that she spits at the rabbis. Okay, so that's that. From then on, Reb Luz never used the word spit in relation to a chalitza. He never used the word spit. When he tells the lady at the chalitza, he says, gather saliva in your mouth and allow it to drop on the floor. He also wanted her to drop it, not to spit it, for another reason. There's a Pischei Tshuva that says that they are dayanim, their bottom have to see the spit leave her mouth and fall to the ground. Now, if she spits, she'll spit with force, and they're not going to see it. And Moshe told Reb Luz that he should be makbid on that Pischei Tshuva. So he never wanted her to spit with force. He always wanted her to drop it. They should see it that way. Okay, finally she spits, and there's some psukim that they have to read before they start, and after they're done, they got to read a few psukim, and that's sometimes fun because sometimes people's Hebrew is not so good, and sometimes people's inflection is not so good. Because I tell you good, and I don't finish the word morning, I sound a little bit odd, right? So you have to make sure the inflection is right. You have to say good morning, right? If you want to say that, how are you doing? Good. You inflect your words that way. Good. But if you want to say good morning, so you inflect your word differently. And it's very important when you say the chalitza, he doesn't want to be miyabim me, and he says lo yavayabmi. That's not true. Lo yavayabmi. So you got to make sure you get it right. It sounds like she means to say lo yavayabmi. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do the yibam. So you got to make sure that the wording comes out right. All right. So she reads the psukim, and then you say the special tefillah, which is printed in the Seder Chalitza, that this should be the last chalitza. There should never be another chalitza ever again. And it's 9:30. I made it. When I first started these speeches, they told me, how long will you speak? I said, if you give me a microphone, you can't turn me off. I have what to say. So, no. The first place I went to, actually, they didn't turn me off, so I went for 2 hours. But since then, I learned how to do it in 45 minutes. Okay. Does anybody want any questions?
This stuff could be like unfinished inside or outside?
The minhagim are that way. It can't be aligning. And the minig is to make, I think based on the idea of Hana'al, that's not finished, it's the hair side, which is the side of the animal that grew the hair, which is much smoother, should be on the outer side. And the flesh side, which they have to clean off the flesh, also it's not naturally it's rougher, but they also clean off the flesh, they leave it rougher, is on the inner side.
So they have to dye the outside?
The outside, you dye only the outside, you don't have to dye the inside.
I see these are knotted on. That's allowed to be knotted?
You're allowed to knot it.
You said no knots.
Oh, the lacing on the bottom, there's no knots. It's just the stitching. And the reason why I knotted it is because it's more convenient for me to do it than to do this double stitching and stuff like that. I did knot them. Yeah. Okay. We do have this farm here for sale. The other box with the prices, I guess, they're still in Vanna, it's still back in Bensonhurst. So that this supports the cause.
Can you mention why, and perhaps I just missed it, why she has to use one hand and why she has to be standing the entire time?
Because everything is done with the right hand. Why everything is done with the right hand? Bezdin, everything done in Bezdin has to stand. So now, what would be if she was old, if she wasn't well, if he was old, he wasn't well? So we can. That's a what if question, and what if questions are always for the rabbi to decide b'shas ma'isa. We can talk all we want about what ifs, but as soon as it comes to ma'isa and the situation changes, and it's the rabbi's call to say he is tired, he is an invalid, he can't stand, he could. This is all the rabbi's decisions, but there's wiggle room to work. The same thing with mitzvahs. All mitzvahs have to be done with the right hand. She has to remove it. So here it's more. If you remove it with her left hand, that's the sugya and that she do that type of the sugya is smaller than his foot. But yeah, that's the pasha that she has to use only her right hand. It's mashman the Gemara that way. It's dafka. If she's a righty, if she's a lefty, she's a left hand. Although I don't believe there's such thing as a righty or a lefty. Right? Some people have the right hand on this side, and some people have the right hand on this side.
And this shoe is universal for the left hand or right?
This shoe, you could make them universal. You can make them fitted. There's a left shoe. Yeah. It's a din bezdin, yeah.
If the person's ambidextrous, they use both ambidextrous, so they use two chalitzas.
So that could happen. We try to work that. We've always worked it out that it wasn't necessary, but it could happen. The place can talk about it. If a person, you don't mean ambidextrous, because that would be on his hands, because dexterous means how talented with the hand. But if he'd be ambivalent, probably that'd be the right word. So then the answer is yes. We could do two shoes. It doesn't. It's not a frequent thing, but yeah.
And why is the string so long? I mean, is there a certain...
Because we measured that 5 feet are about right, but this was left over, so it's a little bit longer than 5 feet. So that's what I had left. I made my Chalitza shoe only a few weeks ago, and I needed to start preparing for this tour, because even though I taught people how to make them, there's tons of people out there who know how to make Chalitza shoes, but the shoemaker's son goes. Thank you. So I made my first Chalitza shoe a few weeks ago.
Which foot does it go in?
It's a left-footed shoe. Why is it left-footed shoe? Because my son was for Pesach making Chalitza shoes, and he left me a left-footed bottom. So it's a left-footed shoe.
And it goes on the man's dominant
Foot.
It goes on his dominant.
Right.
Use like a template from like a regular shoe. Like
I used the template from the shoe that I bought from Reit Yisrael.
You had left and right?
No, we fixed it up a little bit. We made it a little bit bigger. We touched it up. We tweaked it. Yeah. But we used that template, the basic idea.
There's no market for like people selling crazy shoes.
There's no real market. There's a market that sells on Walmart.
How often is there a chalitza?
There was a rabbi, a Svadish Rav, the Svadish community in Flatbush, Chacham Asher. His name is, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Hashoel or something, Hashoel, I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, many years ago, when he became the Abbez and the Sfaradim, so you couldn't get Chalitza shoes, he did a lot of research, and he commissioned somebody, one of his Sfaradim guys was in China, and he got him to make a shoe. He made like 100 shoes, and he sold them, and that was like 20 years ago. Or more, 30 years ago. And since then, nobody ever made it in a commercial way. Here, there's a few guys like me that commission them. Right? It's not a shema, but it's just a question of how to do it. How do you do it? So you have to know a little bit about leather making and a little bit about halacha. But if you're just following, if you're good at following the design and you can follow it perfectly, then you can just make it and copy it. But most people aren't. So you have to have somebody who knows how to do leatherworking.
Is there any concern that once you're adding so many elements of a ensemble back into a middle,
That's nish them and nish them, right? It's not something that we have to decide. The Shoin already decided this for us. Obviously, they held it wasn't the stira. It wasn't the stira. I don't know that it has to be a shoe that's actually a physical shoe that people wear in this society. Because in the time of the Shoinim, they also wasn't the shoe that people were wearing. But that's what the Shoinim wanted us to use. If you're interested, in knowing much more, there's a Meiri, depending on which edition you have, how many pages it is. It's over here on Kuf Beis. It's a fascinating Meiri, and you should absolutely read it. If you just read it, it'll take you 20 minutes, whatever it is, but it's a fascinating piece. You got to read it.
How often are there chalitzas? Is it something that...
How often are chalitzas? I don't know. They say that in the New York area there's about 10 a year. About 10 years ago, I once met the guy came to Rebbe Luth. He was the agent of the Rabbanut. The Rabbanut has a department that when a guy in New Zealand or in South Africa or in Alaska needs some rabbinical services, whether it's a bris or a chsiduk kedushin or a chalitza or a get, they have a department, or they'll send a shliach to any place in the world to take care of that. Well, this guy did the chalitzas. He told me he thinks he has the world record ever of having done the most chalitzas, because any rav in any career ever, so you live in a big city and you have 2 chalitzas your whole career, 3 in your whole career, you're in a European place, you're not getting from the next town over. He had said it says 10 years ago, he told me he'd done 40 chalitzas. So it's not a very common thing. Most of you probably don't know of anybody that ever had chalitza, or you never witnessed a chalitza. It's not a common enough thing. Personally, I did 12 with Rebbe Luth, and I've seen a few more before and after that. But you have to know where to be and want to be there to have to be there, to have seen one.
Do they still say, do they think the firstborn, or it doesn't matter which brother?
The oldest brother is supposed to do it, and we could use the oldest brother when he's available, but sometimes they'll use a younger brother, whoever's available.
If the guy doesn't want to do it?
You beg, you plead, you explain it to him.
Is that common?
Whatever. This guy in Long Island, Hapag, he was very, very resistant. Rebbe Luth is a magician. The guy who didn't listen to the door, when time Rebbe Luth left, was apologizing for his rough introduction. He really, for them, regretted that he treated Rebbe Luth that way. Rebbe Luth was a magician. Nobody could stand up. He was so sweet and so gentle and so kind and so caring. Nobody else to care. He got people to do whatever he needed done in his entire career. People who couldn't get getting out of anybody else. Anybody that couldn't get a get, he got the get.
What did he say to the man in the prison to get him to give the get? What did he say?
I don't know if he ever told me.
Oh.
I don't remember. But if he did tell me, it didn't stick in my brain. That wasn't important enough. The important thing was that he's telling me that he never got upset at anybody, no matter what. That was the part that we're supposed to go home with.
Is there any to do with like as soon as possible, or should wait till she's once again?
It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah chiyuvus. The machlokes in Shulchan Aruch, the Mefarshim in Shulchan Aruch, and the Chalkas Machokek, and the Chalkas Machokek, and the that's another side. Shmuel. They bring Reit, whether if a person has no intention of getting married, whether they need to do chalitza. The halach is that if you don't want to get married, you don't have to do chalitza. It's a hechatimtzah to get married. If you don't want to get married, you don't have to do it. People will do it anyway because they feel excited about it.
Is it worth, do Rabbanim encourage waiting for a larger crowd for a person mitzvah?
No. Nobody's going to wait. I mean, there are certain things you do. You don't do it on certain days and certain times of the day. Like I said, but nobody's going to tell a lady that you wait another week so we should be able to, now it's the summer vacation, wait another week that we should be able to have a big crowd. And in fact, very often the Almana will say, do you really have to have people there? Can't we do this privately? So say that. And then we'll say, yeah, we can do it privately. And we just want it, we can announce it in ways that we don't have to. I mean, not everybody has to know about it. Yeah, we've done plenty of those also where it wasn't a big crowd because they wanted privacy.
Why is there no bracha?
So that's the machlokes whether they say bracha and a chalitza. But the brachas, if you're familiar with the way brachas work, the famous Chuas Rashba, Siman Yud Ches, which when you say brachas, well, you don't say brachas. Anybody can never resolve that thing. So why is there no bracha on Shluch HaKan? Well, is there bracha? Is not a bracha? So there's other things that there's no. Yeah, they don't say bracha. They don't say bracha on this.
The bottom is soft. It's not.
The bottom is a little bit soft because that's just the kind of leather they sent me. I asked them for a stiff leather, and they sent me this. It's not so soft that it's a problem.
In other words, there's no. I guess my question is, there's no sole like a regular.
This is the sole. There's no insole. It has a, yeah.
That's how it was, I guess.
That was it's very important because of this business of the Chalitza, there can't be anything else.
And he only puts on one shoe.
He only puts on one. Well, he can really his other foot can have his regular shoe, whatever it is. That's not a problem. But on this foot, he has only this one shoe. He doesn't put on the chalitza shoe on both feet.
Is there a sheet that the brother's a mummer, then you don't need to do chalitza?
There's a lot of discussion about that in the Rishonim when they had to deal with these issues. But we're not. I mean, if it could happen, I guess, where the brother might be a converted or something, that it could happen, such a thing. But it's not. With the Friar people, we do the chalitza with Friar people. We don't have any issue with that. We don't consider them. We don't treat them that kind of mummer.
And they write her a shtar or whatever.
They write a special shtar, that there's a shtar chalitza, get chalitza, which is that she can have for proof that she had a chalitza if she ever wants to be married. Actually not. He doesn't have to give it to her. The Bezdin gives it to her. It's just a record. It's an official record from Bezdin that it's official standard wording, but it's official record from Bezdin that. Reb Luth always insisted on handwriting with a fountain pen. He wanted that it should never be able to be, it shouldn't be forgeable. He always handwrote it with a fountain pen. By the get down by the chalitzas, he handwrote with a fountain pen. That it shouldn't be forgeable. Nobody should be able to copy it. You have to make sure that it's a unique document. He also had it stamped, official, like a embossed stamp, that it should make sure that it's.
Like a notary.
Yeah.
Why do you throw the shoe?
To show that it's final, it's over. The job, the marriage is over. It's like the last nail in the.
That's a possible, or is it?
No, it's a minik. It's brought inside the chalitza, but it's a minik. All right. Okay, if anybody's interested.